Hey everyone, Meredith here with Madam Diesel. Today, we're not going to work on an engine. We're going to talk about something that I get a ton of questions about, and that's how I started my business and how you can too, what it takes to get started, the generals around what it costs, and whether it's worthwhile. So stay tuned, we're going to go through it. So item number 1, this trade has to be something you're actually interested in and you want to help people with. Every year we see kind of an influx of techs that may or may not be certified, may or may not have the customer's best interests at heart, and they typically don't last very long. They come in thinking that a trade like this is going to be really easy money. They don't want to follow the legal route, and they're trying to pocket everything, and it catches up with them. Usually their quality work is so subpar that they don't last very long, because in the marine industry, word of mouth is extremely powerful. So once people figure out who you are and what you're up to, they're not going to stick around if they don't like it. So if you're planning on becoming a marine diesel mechanic, or any marine trade really, be the best that you can be. That's not to say that you have to give your work away for free. And we'll talk about that in a little while, where yes, there are customers that expect you to bend over backwards for them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to do the best quality work that you can and, support your work, and people will continue to come and they'll support your business. They absolutely have supported mine. And I'm totally willing to bend over backwards for them, mostly because they don't expect it. And so that's the way I can kind of give back to them for supporting me this long. I've been in business almost 9 years now, which is kind of crazy to say. And I absolutely love what I do. Had no intention of starting a business. And I currently have no intention of becoming a giant business. I don't want to become a full-size boatyard or anything like that. I really would like to just keep it, me and puppy dog. And because I want to have control of my own time, I don't want to be managing employees. My business, of course, is my baby. And so if I sent a mechanic out to go work on somebody's engine and they treated my customer like crap, that would not fare well. And the recovery from that would also not be good. So I don't want to get into that. I really love doing just kind of the independent thing. And there's a lot of independents here in Washington State who do amazing work. They also have no desire to get any bigger. It really depends on kind of what your idea of your own business is going to be. And so, sit down, figure out what you want, and that may change over the years, of course. But, come up with at least a general game plan to get started, and then figure out how you're going to do it. One of the biggest things that you're going to want to do when you're looking to start your own business is figure out a way that you can differ from the rest of the industry. So I'm in Washington State in the Puget Sound area. There's a ton of marine diesel mechanics. People have essentially their pick. So how can I be different? One of the big differences is I'm a female. However, I can't bank on that, right? There's lots of customers that really don't want women working on their boat, and that's fine. I don't want to work on their boat. But how can you be different than every other boatyard out there, every other marine, professional? What, is different about hiring you versus the next guy next door? And so I had to try to come up with kind of a game plan where it's like, well, what am I, yes, I'm going to fix marine diesel engines. However, what's going to make me special? And in my case, I really love to teach, and I love having customers over my shoulder. So that's kind of where I differ. I'm kind of the oddball mechanic. Most mechanics don't want you around when they're working. I love having you around. So that's kind of where, I really, I hate to say it struck gold, but I just naturally have always loved teaching. And once I got comfortable with teaching, then it kind of took off. And once my name got out there as somebody who was willing to teach you kind of the processes of what I was doing and explaining every step. Then, word of mouth took it from there. The next big thing is figuring out things like your business name, your business licensing, all the background stuff that nobody sees. So you've got to set up your insurance, you've got to set up your business license. There's several people that work under the table, and when you're just getting started, sure, but you really want to do things the legal way. If your business is actually going somewhere and you're starting to make real money, somebody will find out, and it won't be good when they do. So there's a lot of people under the table in the marine industry. They don't have insurance. They're not able to warranty anything, or they don't want to warranty anything. And when something goes sideways, they're going to disappear into thin air, and you will have lost thousands of dollars. So if you're going to play this game, you've got to play it legally. That's what the customer is actually paying for. The reason my rate costs what it costs is because I'm doing it legally. I'm a legit business in the state of Washington. I am insured in multiple different facets, from shopkeeper's insurance to insurance to be out on the water, which is totally a separate insurance. It all adds up, and that's how, you set your rates. And so sit down and come up with all these expenses of what you need. There's several good kind of videos around of, starting up a business, particularly an LLC. I'm an LLC. And basically what that is a limited liability corp. And it protects me to where if somebody were to sue me or something, they can only take what the business has. There's a corporate veil between my personal life and, what's here at the shop, sort of thing. Now, I don't want to lose what's at the shop either. However, I don't want to lose my boat, which is my house, things like that. So take the time to set yourself up properly, have contracts written out. I'm actually in the process of wanting to do this. I don't typically have issues. I'm very, very fortunate. I have absolutely wonderful customers. However, every once in a while, there's a period of time that I really wish that I had them sign a contract to protect me and to make sure I get paid. And that comes down to if somebody's like arguing the bill, or maybe they weren't quite aware of the scope of what you're going to do, that sort of thing. So set yourself up for success and have all that stuff lined up first. When I first started my business, I, got my state license. I, worked through the Department of Revenue, I believe, for Washington State. And I set up my state license, which was enough to run a business. And I ran the business like that for a few years until one of my friends sat me down and walked me through setting up an LLC. Because like a lot of people, I had no idea, how to even start a business or run one properly. And a lot of it was customers of mine who were retired CPAs or retired business owners that actually walked me through how to charge, how to legally do it, how to pay my taxes properly, things like sales tax and stuff like that. I didn't even know labor was taxable. I was literally paying people's sales tax out of my own pocket. That's how little I knew about starting a business. So a lot of my customers actually really stepped in and showed me the ropes and showed me what I was doing wrong and helped me improve. Now, I don't want to be a massive corporation. I have no desire to do that, as mentioned before. But even a tiny business like me still has some stuff to pay attention to. Like, I still have to pay taxes. I still have to deal with holding on to sales tax for people and filing it and that sort of thing. And so, there's various classes around if you want to take a business class. For me, it was calling around, and the Department of Revenue, at least here in Washington State, was very helpful in terms of, okay, here's how, sales tax works, because I didn't understand what excise taxes were and stuff like that. They broke it down, and they were actually very, very responsive and helpful on the phone, which surprised me because they're a state agency. And, once I figured it out, then I was like, oh, this is, really easy. So the insurance company, that was harder. And the reason it was so difficult was the corner of the business that I actually work in. I fix marine diesels, but I work on the water, and I also work in my shop. And a regular business insurance is not going to cover your work over the water or in a boatyard or whatever like that. So I had to find, I think they call it like shipwrights insurance or something. And it's very, very pricey. It makes shopkeepers insurance look like nothing. Like the rates keep going up every year and, stuff like that. But, once I figured it out, it's an annual, at least the company I go through, it's an annual cost. And I think I started out at $2,500 a year, and then it's gone up significantly. It's more than tripled since then. And that's not because of any accidents or anything. It's just because insurance has literally like doubled and tripled in general. And, so that's probably, short of renting the shop and stuff, that's probably one of my priciest expenses. However, when you think about it, if you screw somebody's boat up or engine up or something like that, I don't want to find out what it feels like to buy somebody a new engine in case something goes wrong. And yes, I'm, a licensed mechanic and everything, but like, I'm human, mistakes can happen, and I will absolutely make it right, but I don't want to find out what the cost of that is. So insurance is an absolute. It's also an absolute if you plan on working in different boatyards. And since I'm half mobile, half in the shop, I do actually go to many boatyards. In fact, yesterday I was in Laconer. And the day before that, I think I was south of, like almost to Portland. So, I'm kind of all over really the West Coast. So you really want to be, covered there. And the marina will not let you come in and work, and neither will any boatyards. So including DIY boatyards, because if they find out that you're a business, they're going to want your business insurance. So make sure you have that squared away before you start any work, even an oil change, even the most basic stuff. You forget to add the oil one time, you are now buying the customer an engine. You wire up something that's relatively basic incorrectly, and the boat burns to the water line. I don't want to find out what that feels like. So insurance is like the bare minimum. The next thing is a lot more exciting than doing all the business paperwork, and that's coming up with, things like your business name, the scope of what you want to do. Are you going to be a bottom painter, a fiberglasser, a marine diesel mechanic? What are you going to do? Are you going to try to do everything? And really, if you're going to get into this business, similar to, automotive, RVs, trucks, that sort of thing, you need to go get training to do it properly. So yes, these engines are mechanical and relatively simple. However, there's quirks about them that unless you have gone through diesel school, you're not going to understand certain things or why certain things are important. And that's really what I'm noticing in this trade is a lot of boatyards will hire guys off the street that have no experience. They're not actual mechanics. They know how to do bolt-on peripheral stuff, but they don't know how to do like a rebuild or any major repair. If they pull your cylinder head, they're not going to know certain things about how to set valves. And that's where I start to see a real lack, like a gap in skill set. And so whatever you decide to do, make sure that you train yourself. I came in with some experience, but I was used to working on the big ships and semi-trucks. So, I had never actually seen a Yanmar before, and they were the cutest engine I've ever seen. Well, they have their own quirks about them. And so, luckily, one of the first boatyards I worked for was a Yanmar dealer, and they sent me to some of the training, and, that kind of got me on par with, how these engines operate and, what they're all about. And then through the experience of actually reading the manuals, tearing them apart, working with people, that sort of thing. But I had that baseline of marine engineering school and working as a heavy diesel mechanic in the trucking world that really made these engines super easy. So whatever you choose to do, you want to be educated in it. And really, what's going to push you ahead of the pack is being really, really good at it. A lot of boatyards, I call them umbrella mechanics because they try to do everything, but they're not very good at any one thing. And that's fine and dandy, kind of like a handyman, very generic, can't get really deep into any one thing, but can do it all. If you need heavy work, you really want somebody that's very, very specialized. And there's a handful of people here in Puget Sound that are super specialized, whether they're marine electricians, diesel mechanics, fiberglass people, people who specialize in like boat bottoms and driveline stuff. And those people I refer to. When I send certain parts out, there's certain shops that only do certain things. And, there's a starter shop that I use, and they can rebuild DC electric motors, and they do an excellent job. They're a mom and pop shop, but they're like the best around. And so every starter and alternator, even a windlass or something, goes to them. And so that's kind of their niche. And, I want somebody who's very specialized in that one thing. Somebody who tries to tackle it all is going to struggle, at least in the beginning, and maybe not do the quality of work that people are looking for. And so whatever you're getting started in, take the time to, figure out what you really want to do and then get really, really good at it. Your career also is never-ending education. So, I've been a diesel mechanic for over 20 years. I still feel like an imposter sometimes. I feel like an imposter because I'm younger, because sometimes somebody will mention something and I'm just like, I've never even heard of that. And then I'm like, what do I actually know? I don't know. And so, it pushes me to go research and learn about the thing. I'm naturally curious and I love engines, so it's really easy to research and study these things through experience. And whether that means just getting an old scrap engine and playing with it so you can figure out its system, then fine, do that. But schooling really set the foundation and then helped me kind of learn what I actually loved. So I really, really love marine, steam, and diesel. And that's my specialty. I don't do much else. I'll do some marine electrical. I've rewired a couple boats, but I don't want to get into things like electronics or lithium or fiberglass or, any of that. I have no desire, but I do have a cache of people that I can refer you to if that's what you're looking for. And there is no shortage of work despite being very specialized. So I think where a lot of people's fears come from is they're like, well, if I only do one thing, then nobody's going to call me. And, but if I do it all, then at some point somebody's going to need me for something. And, starting out with kind of a broad spectrum is not a bad way to go. Obviously, it can be done. There are people who do a variety of things very well. And if you really want to do that, just make sure you're really good at all the things you say you can do, and you'll be good to go. For me, the things I'm really, really good at is marine diesel and marine steam. And, you know, like, I love wiring. If I get tired of engines, I will pick up, you know, like a rewire job or something like that. So I definitely mix it up. But those are literally the only two things, engines and electrical, that I touch. And I stay away from everything else. Even if I think I know how to do it, you know, like, I know how to do marine plumbing. I know how to do blackwater systems. I know how to, you know, do a variety of things. I don't want to do it for money. I am so busy just with the marine diesel side that I could literally cut everything else off and I wouldn't slow down a bit. The next thing you're going to be looking into is getting tools of your trade, right? So I'm a mechanic, so you're going to see things like sockets, wrenches, toolboxes, that sort of thing. Now, one thing that a lot of people get sucked into, including me when I was younger, is the tool storage, and sometimes even the tools themselves. You don't have to have brand name off the get-go, right? It's a huge investment getting very high-end, high-quality stuff. However, there is a time and a place for it. So I did not start with Snap-on stuff, and a lot of these things, like this cart right here, I actually found used at a swap meet at an antique engine show. So you can get some really high-end stuff for really cheap if you know where to look. But this does not make me a better mechanic. What it does help me with, though, and I've learned over my years of working on engines, that things like sockets and ratchets, the stuff that you use every day, typically the higher end tools perform better. And I'm saying that in reference to things like my sockets. The fit of them, it is notably different than a cheaper brand. Now, I see a lot of techs out there with Harbor Freight, and Harbor Freight is wonderful. I wish it had, you know, existed with the Icon line when I got started, because I would have probably bought that instead of all the Snap-on ratchets. But I have owned a few things and they have not held up. I've had these ratchets since I was 12. And so there is a difference. And the longer you're in business or doing this trade, you're going to probably accumulate whatever tools that you prefer. It really comes down to kind of what you prefer and what works for the type of jobs you're doing. Where people get into trouble is they go super duper cheap. And I got called out to help this guy who was trying to start out as a diesel mechanic. He took like a class or something that was like a weekend class. And he was hammering on a turbo with a carpentry hammer. And that's not okay. You need the right tools. And if he had gone to Harbor Freight and gotten like the rubber mallet, that would have been fine. But he was just kind of using whatever he had in his garage. And he ended up breaking some pretty expensive stuff that we then had to fix. And so stuff like that, you know, like, get the right tools for your trade. And if there's a specialty tool that you know you're going to need, spend the money on it, because that will improve your life, but it will also make you a lot more efficient, because people are paying you hourly to do this work. And if you're in automotive or something like that, they're paying you flat rate. So, you know, if an impact gun helps you get the job done quicker, so you save the customer money and you know, profit yourself, then go for it. But you don't need to start out with something like that. You know, start with your basic all-around set of tools that's decent enough quality that you're not going to be breaking and rounding off bolts, and then build from there. I started with a lot of like Craftsman. My dad bought me one of those mechanics sets. In fact, this set right here, I have a bunch of my Craftsman. It's a Matco set, but a lot of my Matcos are in my big box, and I've been using these sockets with and without the impact since I was 13, and there is nothing wrong with any of this stuff. So And now that I'm older and I'm going to things like swap meets, I always keep my eyes peeled for really good deals. If I see, a Snap-on cart for $50, yeah, that's awesome. I get a good quality cart and it was $50. So, there's ways around the expense of getting all the high-end stuff. You don't have to start out with the high-end stuff just to open a mechanics business. And having the name brand on like a toolbox or tool is not what defines you as a mechanic. It does not matter. Over your years of working, you are going to learn what you prefer using. And everyone has different preferences on what tools they prefer. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. A really important thing to consider with your business is, one, how are you going to categorize your customers? And two, how are you going to take money? How are you going to get paid? And everyone has different preferences based on what they're comfortable with. For me, I'm old school. I like cash or check. A lot of people do not like that. Checks can be fairly unreliable if the wrong person is writing it. So, they prefer, say, Venmo or Zelle or PayPal or whatever. I personally have had, security issues with them, so that's why I do it the old school way. But come up with a way that you can get paid. Most businesses really need to have the ability to at least accept a credit card, especially if they're going to be doing anything commercial. And so I do work for the U.S. government and the state governments periodically. And state can write you a check. Washington State can typically write me a check. However, the feds will not write a check. I made that mistake early on in my business where I asked for a check and it was over a year before I got the check. So I do have Square to be able to take a credit card. However, I rarely use it. I only ever use it when I'm working on a federal job or something like that. That way they can pay me like same day and it's really easy. But, that's something to consider if your scope of work is working with, larger commercial agencies or something. They need to be able to pay you quickly. And, invoicing is a whole nother realm. When I first got started, I formatted a Word document into an invoice, and I actually still use that on my really big jobs. So if I'm on board a boat doing a refit where there's tons of materials, tons of hours, things like that, I will go home and type it up on the computer. I did actually pay for a billing software a number of years ago. It was very expensive. It was like $250 a month or something. And it was great, but it was geared towards more of like a truck shop, diesel shop. And so what was cool about it is you could write like an estimate, send that to the customer would approve it, and then all the parts and materials and everything would get sent off to the companies where you're going to order them. So if I was going to order a bunch of Yanmar parts from a dealer, that's local to me, it would automatically send the Yanmar dealer, a parts request for quotes and, let's get it ordered. And so very, very handy. However, the issue that I ran into was a lot of the local businesses that I shop through, whether it was other diesel shops or sometimes bigger like stores, they wouldn't respond to the emails, even though they said they would. Like I called them and entered the information in my program, and then it would send them a notice and they would just ignore it. And so I ended up having to call anyways, and that was like a real big hassle. And I'm like, why am I paying almost $300 a month to have this like resource when other people aren't using it? So I actually went back to being old school, which works just fine for me. Luckily, I'm small enough that an Excel spreadsheet for all my business expenses and billing and stuff like that, it works great. My CPA loves me, which is awesome. And I'm so ADHD that sometimes when I'm working late on a project, I do not want to go home, open the laptop, and write an invoice. So another thing that I do is I carry carbon copies, just regular invoice copies. And what I really need to do is have my name put on them. I need to just get around to doing that, and I haven't done that yet. But right now I use generic, like Office Max kind of invoice sheets, and I'll just write down the invoice same day, hand it to the customer, and even if they're not paying me that day, at least my end is done. Because I have had times where I've taken like weeks to get an invoice out, like I get really overwhelmed or I forget. And I know other like techs in the marine industry have done that as well. They're doing so many jobs and they have so many people calling them all the time that, the last thing on their mind really is getting the invoices out, at least until they can get home and sit down and really process all the jobs they've done. Well, at that point, if it's been weeks, you're most likely not going to be that accurate unless you're really good at documenting the things you use. And so for me, I need to write it down pretty much same day, and the carbon copy invoices really help me do that. I probably can only get away with that because I'm such a small business. But I have seen larger businesses do it, like it's still a legal invoice. Even writing it out on a piece of paper and handing it over is technically a legal invoice. So, like whatever works for you, you do want to stay on top of your billing though. And that's kind of hard for me because I'm not motivated by money. In fact, money is not, I would rather like trade something if I could. If I could afford to just trade labor for, other things, that would be awesome. But, our world operates on money. So I've got to make money to pay for the shop, pay for the tools, that sort of thing. And so, I've got to make that a priority in my business. What I'm glad to say is, I like fixing engines enough, I would do it for free, but that ain't going to pay the bills. So you need to get serious. And, people don't like waiting around. I'm very fortunate. Most of my customers are super honest. So there have been times where, I came out, I worked on their boat, and I completely forgot to invoice them. I was just overwhelmed at the time or whatever. And sure enough, they text me and say, "Hey, Meredith, we owe you money. Like, don't forget to write us an invoice." And so things like that help keep me on track. And that's where, taking care of your customers, they're going to take care of you. And a lot of my customers really, they want my business to succeed. And I want them to be safe on the water. So it actually works out really well. And they've helped me out a lot. So thank you guys for all that you do to keep me straight, because I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. One thing to consider with any business really is, how are you going to get your name out there? You've come up with your business name, yay. Now, how are you going to let people know that you exist? Because just because you have the paperwork doesn't mean anyone knows about you. And so what I've learned in the marine industry especially, but I know this is true in many other industries, is word of mouth is extremely powerful. And I'm kind of an old soul. I'm not huge into advertising. In fact, a lot of times it really turns me off. When you bombard me with ads, I will never buy your product. And I've seen small businesses start to do that where, like they started as, like a small creator on YouTube, and they had a small niche, and before you know it, you're getting their ads on your Facebook feed. And they are bombarding you to the point where I'm like, okay, I know you want business and that's great, but like, I'm done with you now. So, several marine businesses have kind of moved into the area recently, and they are doing that kind of bombardment type advertising. So much so that it's turned me off completely to them. Now, what's also reinforced that decision is I am hearing feedback from customers who have hired them, And, they advertise that they're the best, that they're, the greatest pricing and all this stuff. And I hear the reality, from my customers, oh, we hired them and it was really bad. And so however you go about it, you got to get your name out there somewhere. For me, I was, lucky. I actually used Facebook kind of as my main platform, and Facebook is kind of my website. A lot of people do, they'll get like a Squarespace website or something, and that works too. For me, I would post regularly on Facebook, and I would post a lot of pictures of what I was doing, which I didn't realize just how many people were interested in seeing like an engine torn apart. So it was fun for me to be like, hey, I tore a cylinder head apart today. Check out the damage, and I would kind of teach. I'd write, a paragraph about like what I had found and why it was bad. And people really were interested in that. And a couple of those people happened to be at the marina where I lived. And they're like, you're really good at teaching. Can we hire you to come look at our engine? And so that's kind of what started the word of mouth thing. Was a lot of people found me initially on maybe Facebook, and then word of mouth, like they would ask their friends and neighbors on the docks, and they would get the reinforcement like, yes, she is legit, she is good. And sure enough, I would get a phone call. And so that's when I finally decided to, kind of put my phone number up there, like, okay, it is kind of my website. And believe it or not, people treat it as your resume. And so I've always been very careful not to, like when I was in college, I never posted like drinking photos or anything like that. And I wasn't much of a partier anyways, I was a nerd. But, like that sort of thing, you see other kind of marine techs get really inappropriate. Like they'll argue with customers, they'll talk smack about customers, and they're very public about it. And that feedback is not good. I read that and I'm like, he is immature. I would never hire him to work on my boat. And I imagine a lot of people are kind of the same way. And so if you're going to be on social media, you need to be very professional and think about what you're posting, because remember, the entire world can see it, right? And so, feel free to share what you do. There's a lot of people who are genuinely interested. I mean, look at you guys. You guys are watching me on YouTube, fix engines. Bunch of nerds, I do the same. I really love following different trades. I'm interested in what they do, and I may never pursue that as a career, and that's fine. I'm just curious, I'm genuinely curious. And so Facebook has kind of been my website. Then from there, I happen to be teaching at the same time, and I got invited to write some articles for a couple magazines, both local and national. And so many of you guys know that I write for 48 Degrees North. I've written a couple articles for Practical Sailor. And so that pushed my name out even further as, somebody who teaches about diesel engines. I also taught at one of the local maritime colleges here in the Seattle area, teaching commercial marine diesel. And that doesn't necessarily help with the recreational, like bringing recreational customers in. However, once the customers find me, they really appreciate knowing that like I'm a legitimate professional. And so having like references like that are really good, because I always encourage people like, hey, if you can, check some references, make sure they're like a real diesel mechanic before you hire them. And, some ways of doing that is finding out where they've worked, who they've worked for. And, I think people have actually called the school and said, was she really an instructor? And I was, so that helped them feel confident in hiring me, because, they don't know me from Joe Blow. And so, setting up your name in such a way that it's easy to find, easy to reach out to. And then probably the most important thing, which I do not understand to this day, is once you start getting customers, you need to answer the phone and show up on time and do what you say you're going to do. And this is rampant in the marine industry. And I get it. It gets overwhelming. I don't really actively advertise, at least on purpose. I probably do through secondary channels, like probably YouTube or something. But, I don't actively really push to get hey, you should hire me, and there's a lot of people, my phone goes off all the time. And there's a lot of times where I'm booked out more than a month, couple months usually. And sometimes I can't get to it. It's too far out, or, what they're asking just isn't the right fit. It's not something I do or specialize in. And that's okay. You don't have to take every job. And the more experience and time you have as a business, you can turn down jobs. But it's really the respectful thing not to waste the person's time. Don't tell them, oh yeah, we can do it, or I can do it, and then never show up. A lot of people, take the day off work, take time away from their families to meet you at their boat. They've put it in their schedule. And I've seen this personally where a friend of mine literally took a day off work and the guy didn't show up because he had taken a bigger job. And then he wouldn't answer the phone, at least until eventually, when then he was like, oh yeah, I just took a bigger job. And that has to be the most disrespectful thing I've ever seen, where it's but we were scheduled first and we waited weeks or months for you, and some bigger job came by and you just took that, because it's more money, or, so that it's just a slap to the face to the customer. And I'm no entrepreneurial expert, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But through my experience, if it's something you're not interested in, or you can't do, or maybe the vibe with the customer isn't right, just tell them. Just say, hey, I don't know enough about this to feel comfortable doing it for money. And most customers, I've never had a customer get mad at me for being you know what, I really, without a manual or something, I'm not comfortable tearing this apart. I just don't know enough about it. And there's certain things that are kind of a hard stop for me, where I just don't know enough about it to want to take money for it. Yes, I could learn about it down the road. Maybe I will, but I just tell them up front, and it's no big deal. So you don't want to make false promises or anything like that. Just be very clear with what you do and what you don't do. And, if you need to refer somebody or just tell them no, then do it. Very few customers will get upset, and the ones that do, you don't want to work for them anyways. Well, hopefully the things I've said in the video haven't scared you off yet. We need great people in the industry. In fact, the industry is really hurting for tradespeople of any sort, whether they're mechanics or otherwise. That probably is true for land-based jobs as well, contractors, that sort of thing. You are in control of what you do, how you treat people, how you treat the business, how you spend your money. And so, you don't need to be an expert. I'm certainly not. I'm not an entrepreneur that is striving for money. I will never be a billionaire. I have not figured out how to make millions of dollars off of changing oil yet. And I'm not sure that I want to. That's not my happy place. My happy place is getting to meet people, work with people, teach them how to do this and have fun with it, and pay my bills at the same time. That was the goal of my business, was as long as I can support myself, then I consider myself a success. And I've gone beyond that, where I've been able to expand what I can do for people. I've been able to travel the country, which I never thought that people from outside of Washington would find me and ask for me. That's really cool. I get to teach the trade, which I had always kind of wanted to do, but I wasn't really sure how to get my foot in the door. Well, ever since I started my business, suddenly teaching opportunities have come up at different employers. And I've actually become like a desirable mechanic to what used to be dream employers, which I think is funny. Years ago, I applied to all these places that I really, really wanted to work at, and they ignored me. And now they're like knocking on my door trying to get me, and I'm turning them down. So being self-employed, it's a ton of work, right? You're gonna be up late, you're gonna be working many hours that you're not paid for. And you have to be dedicated to that if you're gonna make your business move forward, right? I can go work all day turning wrenches, but if I don't come home and do the paperwork, my business isn't going to function very long, or I'm going to be so behind it's bad. So, you're going to put way more time, effort, and energy into, becoming a self-employed business in the marine world, or any world for that matter. But if you're willing to do it, then, it can offer a level of freedom that maybe you don't have with an employer. The reason I got into doing this was, because of my health and stuff, I was struggling with employers. I would need to take days or afternoons off to go see a doctor, and employers, because I was a young person, thought I was screwing around, and I wasn't. And so I actually lost a couple jobs because of things like my diabetes, and that really sucked. So this allows me to set my own schedule, and I'm not going to fire myself because I had a doctor's appointment. So it pays off in different ways, and for me it was having like the freedom of my own schedule. Do I work more than I do at an employer? Absolutely. I work way more hours. There's a lot of times where I work every day of the week. I've tried to be better about taking my weekends off. I still struggle with that because I really want to get people's projects done and get them on their way and help them like enjoy their seasons. But yeah, I work way more than I ever did working as an employee in somebody else's shop. But at the same time, it's worth it to trade for the freedom I need to do the things I need to do in my personal time. So that's kind of where it pays off for me, and it may pay off differently for you. And if you're willing to put the effort in, you won't regret it. It's like you can be as big or as small as you desire. There's no rules for how to make your business. If you want to be a massive enterprise, then go for it. If you want to be a tiny business like me, then also go for it. And, enjoy the process. Take care of your people because they'll absolutely take care of you. And have fun with it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video helped you. I've been getting tons of questions over the past couple years, actually. Pretty much once I became like an instructor, I always get questions about, hey, we want to get into the marine industry. I am probably going to do another video on how to get into like the commercial marine industry, because that's a very different process than, like what I'm doing currently, which is mostly recreational. And, but for those of you who kind of want to work the recreational game, we're desperate for good people. And, it's a really rewarding career. I love my customers. I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to have made it this far. I don't know how, because I have no idea what I'm doing half the time, I swear. But, it's been quite the experience, and I don't regret any of it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will plan on seeing you guys in the next video.